Okay, yeah, what I'm going to go through is introducing a project which, even though we've made big steps forward over a year, will probably be unknown to the majority of people in the room. And as Andy says, it's something which is linked not only with Edge Hill, there's work that we've done with Johnny and the guys at Everton. So it's a different context in terms of sport, but it's certainly something which covers a lot of the themes that have been discussed already today. And within that, I think, hopefully, having thought up the group's name myself, it makes sense in terms of the area in which we work. If you're a cricket fan, you'd realise opening up is regarding opening the bat in, you're the first to face the ball, but then it gives you a little bit of a nudge towards the work that we do in terms of the attitudes within cricket towards mental health, well-being and so on. Okay, essentially, well, what we do, and without trying to simplise it, is that we promote mental health, well-being and suicide prevention through cricket. So within that, we look at a well-being aspect in a couple of different ways. One of which is to provide support to people who do have existing mental health issues, but also it's to equip people with the ability to be able to be more resilient to perhaps challenges they may face. And this is where the concept of mental fitness is something that has been a popular theme that we've looked at with participants and clubs that we've looked at. So that takes a couple of different strands with that. We also have focus on suicide prevention as well. And that can be just in the wording sometimes when we visit clubs, something that they consider to be a little bit stark compared to perhaps some of the messages they might receive. But I'll go into why that's a particular focus for us just shortly. But both are an attempt, in the simplest form, to make cricket, as it currently is, better equipped to help people in this area. And really a simple message to those who play to be able to be a better mate, to look out for teammates and make use of an existing structure within cricket clubs and within sport that actually already facilitates good mental health. Okay, we deliver through 5 strands. I'm not going to go into depth on all of them, and some of them are still under development, but the first one, which we'll be looking to develop even further with Edge Hill and with Everton, is the idea of a community strand, following some of the things that Everton have done and perhaps looking how cricket can fit people who may not have an existing loyalty to cricket, who may have seen a bit of it on the TV or in the park and think that might be something they want to get involved with. Our main bit, though, is at the moment within the clubs. We go out and visit them. We deliver sessions to provide them with some basic information on how to support those with depression, anxiety, stress, or whichever other area of mental health, but also to be able to help them look after their own well-being, which is something which has been neglected in the sport previously. There's also an education aspect where this kind of thing fits in, where we like to relay this to groups who have got interest and say, well, actually, cricket is a sport where statistics rule, so if you throw out a few percentages to people and this many and that many, that kind of piques some interest, and then follow that up with what it can mean for them. And we also look at developing resources which clubs can have to pass on the message themselves, as well as use more and frequently of the media, and we'll be launching a website soon to that effect. The main aspect, though, can be, especially in areas where there will be an existing issue, perhaps within a club or with a group of players, that we principally exist to signpost services. No one who's involved in the project is a mental health or a medical professional, and we don't pretend to be. So if there is something which needs closer consideration, then we do signpost. And in particular, we signpost to Calm, and I know that Simon gave a talk earlier. Unfortunately, I wasn't here to hear it, but we've signposted to Calm in particular for a couple of reasons. One, because largely the demographic we deal with fits in with their target audience as well, young males between the ages of around about 15 to 35. Not exclusively, but that does tend to be our target area when we approach cricket clubs. We also direct towards Calm because of the kind of message that they send out. that it's to put mental health in a context which isn't just in textbooks or something that a doctor might talk to you about, but actually is all around you and is something that actually is something to be talked about. That theme comes through quite a lot. We also, of course, signpost to a variety of other services, the NHS and other areas to help as well. So by the time myself or anyone else who's given a presentation to a club has left, we feel confident that if they were to encounter some form of challenge with that, in that respect in their club, they would know where to signpost it to. The first thing I say to some clubs is actually it's not for you to medicate someone, that was a question once, or to provide every solution. It's to perhaps to be that first point of contact, be accepting, and then be able to direct them to someone who is better trained to be able to do that. So I suppose the idea would be why we do it. Of course, it's a great idea to do it, but we've got particular motivations which link to our personal experience. So Opening Up was formed earlier on this year, in fact, as a result of the death of our friend and teammate Alex Miller. The group that supports me with the project all play at the same cricket club, Sefton Park in South Liverpool. And Alex was a friend of ours and was someone who was our teammate. And when he took his own life, the consequences of that were pretty severe. There was a huge outpouring of grief amongst our members. Not simply because it was a friend and because it was a teammate, but because of the kind of person it was. Had Alex not had the tragic end that he met, he would have been someone incredibly keen on this kind of event and this kind of project, because his attitude towards others first and foremost was to look after them. Unfortunately for him, that was a lot of the time whilst neglecting his own well-being. So we formed it as a result of that, because we've seen within society and also within our own sport that there is a significant gap for mental health issues being addressed, and indeed suicide even being talked about. We find that within our age group, and I'm just about leaving the age group that I was referring to earlier, we have, apart from groups like Carmen and others who've been represented today, very little discussion of these kind of themes. It is still something which is stigma, although that is trying to be removed. And we found within cricket that surely this kind of experience might make people think a little bit differently about that, if that was someone they played against. And some of the talk at clubs is not so much to say put yourself in our shoes, but to say the reason we do it is so that we don't want someone else having to work out how they're going to deal with a loss like that. So we saw a gap in general society, and that's when I first got in touch with Carmen and then made the link with Simon, because we thought within society in general there isn't the support for young men and indeed anyone who has that kind of problem. It's limited, and of course I'm sure Andy said earlier regarding funding and all the rest of it. But we focused specifically on cricket and thought, why is it that cricket, a sport like no other else for high profile instances of players with depression, and indeed there has been occurrences of suicide, why hasn't anything more been done about that? Surely it can't just be an issue of funding or will. There's things done professionally with the Professional Cricket Association, which is useful for professional cricket players. However, the vast majority, play it recreationally. It's supposed to be your release from your week at work or what have you. And there, as we found out, as we started to do our research, there's nothing in place for that. Mass participation sport in this country, and no county board or national governing body had made the attempt to address that. So we felt there was something we could do there to at least start that ball rolling. And the reason we do it is because the simplest thing to pass on to the clubs, their members and their associated fields of interest is this idea, and I'm sure it's been touched on so much today, is to talk, and then talk some more, because we'll go into a session and I'm not able then to say what would be the right medication for someone who is perhaps suffering with manic depression or someone who is dealing with anxiety or so on. But what we do know from experience is that that opportunity to talk is incredibly liberating. There's people who've spoken to me who've said they've had issues in their club, for example, and just having someone talking about it has felt like a prod to them to make them go to their friends and say, you know what that fellow was talking about before? Well, actually, that's something I've gone through, or that's what my brother deals with. And they found that hopefully something which is a move towards a culture change, which of course is not going to happen overnight. And that, of course, is Alex there. We find that in terms of this and in terms of the whole project, because it is a personal response that has come from it, we will often make reference to Alex in things we do, and everything we'll do within this will be with him in mind and say, would this be something that he'd approve of? Would he want us to go in this direction? Would he want to be involved with it, etc.? So occasionally we will use on social media hashtags and so on to say, for Alex. And that is a personal thing, but hopefully the process of the project will mean that it can be taken on personally by other clubs and other groups in our sport, so that they can be saying, well, this is actually for someone that we may have lost or someone that we're about to lose because of the situation they find themselves in. Okay, within it, there's obviously a lot of challenges, and I think that's something that can sometimes be ignored within this kind of area. People might want to look at the things that go well and not reflect on the challenges. And some of these are elephants in the room when it comes to mental health, in my view. One is this overarching idea that stigma of mental health still exists. As much as people may be polite at sessions that we've delivered and so on, there is, and you can tell. I'm a teacher, so I can tell when someone's not listening. I can tell when they'd rather be somewhere else. That's all my history lessons that I teach during the week. But in terms of these sessions, it's the case that you can see across the room a particular cricket club. There'll be some people who are really on board with it and will perhaps have invited you. There'll be some who are undecided, and it may take them a few minutes to go one way or the other. And there'll be some who, again, nice and polite, I may know them from having played against them or in another context, but really, the eyes are glazed over and they're thinking, it's going to be over in a bit. And that's because of a number of reasons. It may be they don't want to think about it. They may not think it applies to them. We could probably write a PhD on it. But that's something to be broken down, and it's just bit by bit at the moment, keeping reinforcing the message, almost pestering them in a nice way to say, this issue isn't going to go away, so within that, neither are we. And if you're bored of seeing my face, then Luke will come, or John will come, or Chris will. So that's one bit of it. This falls into, I'm sure, what Simon was saying earlier, the traditional male attitude to opening up, and that's, of course, opening up the concept rather than our project, that it's still something that men find incredibly difficult to come forward and say to their mate, look, there's something bothering me. I just need to get this off my chest. I need to have some help with this. I'm struggling with work. I'm struggling with a relationship. I've got debts up to my ears. You know, what can I do about this? And I say this from personal experience because when I started the project, I would class myself as having been a hypocrite. Because in 2007, just as I was finishing my degree at Liverpool, I had what amounted to a nervous breakdown. And I spent a lot of time constructing this project and the way in which we were trying to do it for Alex, and very much focusing on him, which of course is as it should be. And I would not be telling the people around me about my experience and how that still affects my life. So then I did feel a little bit awkward sometimes going into another cricket club and telling them that they should be speaking to their mates and advising them and saying, you're a good mate because you're listening. This is someone you can contact if you need more help. And all the time, there was something there which I hadn't shared with a lot of people. So I went through the process of starting to myself open up a little bit more. And the words that I was saying to others, it is liberating. It feels better. I actually felt it happen to myself and thought, it's not often I'm saying stuff that's right, but this one actually does make sense. So from that, it's been a process personally, as well as with the rest of the team, to say these challenges do exist because we know it from within ourselves. So our other challenge is integrating well-being into sport. It fits in with the other two, and particularly in our sport, it would be the case that if I arrive at any club or any group of players and ask a question, who looks after your mental health at this club, it's either met with a bit of a grimace or a frown or a kind of reflective look and saying, well, I don't quite know what you mean. And that really is answer enough. There's not anything in place within cricket, within clubs or within any structure to say, this is even someone you go to. There might be a good egg who says, people can talk to me, but there's nothing there which exists in a formalised way where people can say, that's a route I take. So we're trying to get that integrated more and more. All these challenges are long term. There's not going to be a day where I turn up at whichever cricket club and they say, it's all sorted, we're all talking to each other, no one's got any issues, it's fully integrated into the sport, and we're opening up left, right and centre. So it's something to build along, and the experience from other sports, when I've spoken to Phil and the guys at State of Mind, the rugby league group, it's something which makes a progress over a period of time. And we're just starting out, so we're hoping that we can follow the pattern that has been set up in a couple of other sports there. Well, our experience has been that it's been broadly positive. People do respond to it. And as I say, there's a number of case studies where people would say the experience of just having someone talking about mental health has encouraged them to then broach that subject with friends and those closer to them. Feedback is in the process of being gathered from the participants and the clubs that have gone on this year. And it does indicate a tangible impact. I've revisited certain clubs, not necessarily with the project, but perhaps within my own involvement in cricket. And I've noticed, from what they have said, a significant change sometimes. There will have been, and perhaps it's fortunate I've been there at that time to introduce these kind of themes, and that will have led to a conversation whereby a member in a club who was particularly vulnerable will have found the courage to then speak to a friend, and then that support has been put in place. And it's largely within this a positive message. I don't want to go in there to give people statistics on suicide, depression, how the male is struggling in isolation. It's to say this is happening, but within cricket and any other sport, you've got a unique aspect of being able to support each other. So we find that by being involved in a cricket club and all the things that can bring, the camaraderie, the aspects of attainment as well as attachment, means that once they do start talking, it snowballs in a good way in which they're able to get some effects from that. The link of mental fitness with performance has been embraced. Particularly some of the clubs we've gone to have really looked into the idea of saying, maybe it's too much to begin with to get them to think just directly about their own personal well-being or that of friends. But if you introduce the concept of mental fitness and say, being more equipped in terms of your psychological approach to the game, your ability to enter the crease when you're batting without worries about work before, having a clear and uncluttered mind, that's got a few people interested. And I've had people after sessions saying, is this kind of thing going to improve my game? And I'm not there necessarily as a performance director, but I've said to numerous coaches, this kind of thing is good for your club in every way possible. It will help people in their performance of cricket. Surely it will. If you can enter your game without worrying about things during the week and just concentrate on your game, that's going to lead to an improvement there. So the mental fitness bit has been useful, and that's going to be a link that we're going to, certainly with new clubs, introduce areas of the project with, to then provide the more general wellbeing bits, because not every player in the club will benefit from that kind of intensive coaching that maybe first 11s have. The experience is there's still much to do regarding visibility of support for wellbeing. We've got certain clubs whereby there'll be a dominant character who says, you know, you can unload your problems on me, I'm the person, you know, I'm someone you can talk to. Well, there may be 3 or 4 of them. But I find even in my own club, it's difficult for people to find that kind of, that link of who they might speak to or where to find that, or even to think, is it a lottery if I speak to someone, is someone going to be accepting of that? So there's much more to do with that, and we're working forward to have, in conjunction with a couple of the local leagues as well as the cricket board for Lancashire, to have something in place which provides a role for that, whether it be a wellbeing officer, something to do with existing welfare areas, to say in actual fact this is something that is acknowledged as part of a cricket club, and therefore having that recognition it's there leads to conversations, which is what the whole process is indeed about. So finally, to think of the plans for the future and how this fits in with other things that have been mentioned today. We're confirming more and more as we go along the link between ourselves and Edgehill University. That's indeed why we're here today, and the support that Andy provides is invaluable for that. We've also now got the use of Ollie, our guy who is doing his masters, to produce research which can give these kind of figures which we can then take forward to look and say, it's benefited this many, how can we roll it out in future? Very similar to the kind of things Johnny was talking about. And also we found the sharing of good practice in numerous meetings that myself, Johnny and Andy have had, with Everton and community being a real flagship in this area. If we're able to do a small section of what they do to a small extent, then it will be a satisfactory and indeed successful project, because everything that's done there, everyone I speak to, it's every project that's done there is spoke of in the highest esteem. So if any link there, we can gather things from that, is always beneficial. With the move towards cross-sport projects, not just isolating it in cricket. Okay, we're also speaking with our cricket body, the Lancashire Cricket Board and the Lancashire Foundation, about how we can get that on a regional level. So rather than it being just something that's sparked from a small part of Liverpool, by having a direction from a governing body, even though it is just a regional one, just lend that weight to it in terms of visibility in clubs especially. The plan is also to offer suicide prevention training across the region to clubs. So that's something that we've already had a bit of a chat with Christine about, to say, at the very least, if these clubs aren't going to be automatically having a wellbeing officer or something in that guise, it's to have suicide prevention training so that people know exactly how to deal with these kind of things should they arise. And within that, have a greater awareness of the themes. It's something I keep coming back to in the talks, and whenever I come into contact with this, is the aspects of talking and having that awareness is so important. So anything we can do to get that going as well. But also is to develop our 5 strands to fulfill our purpose, to make sure that everything we do isn't diverted to something that perhaps someone else wants to do or what might be a trend at the time. Our purpose is what I mentioned on the first slide, to promote mental health, well-being and suicide prevention through cricket, and that is because of our personal experience. So as much as we want to adapt and take on different things, we're very focused on what we want to achieve and why we do, and the bottom line really is that. But within that, and nice of me to contradict myself here, isn't it? We will also respond to specific requests from and challenges in our sport. So if people in cricket are now starting to get used to this idea, we're certainly happy to entertain any ideas in terms of how it can be integrated. Some of the stuff the county board has said hadn't occurred to me, but it does fit. So there's lots of ways that it can go in there. The idea is that well-being, people opening up, is going to be just as much a part of cricket as taking wickets, scoring runs, and drinking within moderation after the game. So that's really our plans there. That's as brief as I could be. I know everyone's been here for a long time. So just to say finally, what helps us in a number of ways is the use of social media. We're moving forward to something more static online in terms of a website, but we're via that handle, if you wish to follow us. You can also send me an email via that with any suggestions, ideas, or if there's a possibility of a link up or suggestions and anything like that. But otherwise, I'll call that time, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to field them. Thank you.